All right, let's talk about a name you definitely know, Texas Instruments. For millions of us, right, it was just a staple of our school days. But what if I told you the company we think we know isn't the real company at all? Not even close.
Yeah, when I say Texas Instruments, I'm willing to bet this is the exact image that pops into your head. The trusty old TI-84. It's basically an icon of high school math, kind of a rite of passage, right? We've all been there trying to figure out those buttons. Okay, but here's the kicker. What if this thing, the one product that defines the entire company for basically all of us, is just 3% of their actual story? Yeah, you heard that right, 3%. The real story is so much bigger.
So let's do it. Let's peel back those layers and meet the real Texas Instruments. I mean, this thing was the standard, right? Your teacher told you to get it, and heaven forbid you showed up with some other brand. You'd be holding up the whole class. It was an essential tool, and let's be honest, for most of us, it's the only product we've ever knowingly bought from them.
Okay, now this is where the story gets really interesting. Get this. The company was founded way back in 1930, but they didn't sell a single calculator until the 1970s. That's a 40-year gap. So the big question is, what on earth were they doing for all that time? Well, as it turns out, they were busy changing the world.
Yeah, to really understand who they are today, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. And trust me, their origins have absolutely nothing to do with calculators and everything to do with oil and war.
So, before they were ever Texas Instruments, they had a totally different name, Geophysical Service, Inc., or GSI for short. We're talking 1930, founded by a couple of geophysicists, J. Clarence Karcher and Eugene McDermott. And their entire business, their whole reason for being, was built around this one single groundbreaking technique for finding oil.
So let me break down how this worked, in super simple terms. They'd have this special truck that would literally send sound waves deep into the ground. Bam! Those waves would travel down, bounce off all the different rock layers, and then reflect back up to sensors they had on the surface. By analyzing all that data, the scientists could basically create a map of what was hiding underground and find potential oil reserves. It was a total game changer for oil exploration.
And then, World War II happened. Everything changed. The U.S. military desperately needed electronic gear, stuff like radar systems. And, believe it or not, it turned out that the skills GSI had perfected for finding oil were super transferable. So, they started up an electronics division. And honestly, this one pivot would define their entire future. After the war was over, electronics wasn't just a side gig, it became their main focus.
And this right here, this is the moment where Texas Instruments goes from being just another important company to becoming one of the most important companies of the entire 20th century. This is where they become a key player in what we call the Silicon Revolution. It's kind of hard to imagine, but before the 1950s, computers relied on these massive, fragile, super power-hungry things called vacuum tubes. I mean, they were huge and just wildly inefficient. Then came the transistor, this tiny little semiconductor device that changed literally everything. It was smaller, it was way more durable, and it was incredibly efficient. Let's be clear, modern computing is simply impossible without it. Now, other companies were playing around with a material called germanium for their transistors. But a brilliant scientist at TI named Gordon Thiel, he perfected the silicon transistor. Why does that matter? Well, silicon was just way more stable and reliable. And in 1954, his team created the very first one that could actually be mass-produced. This was the moment Texas Instruments stepped onto the world stage.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. PBS said this invention was the thing that catapulted TI from a small startup electronics company into a major player. Think about that. They were the first to mass-produce a single component that would power the entire digital age to come.
And if you want to see the impact, you just got to look at the numbers. It's wild. So in 1952, right before the silicon transistor really took off, their sales were sitting around $20 million.
But check this out. Just 4 years later, after their invention hit the market, sales had more than doubled to 46 million. I mean, the growth was just explosive.
And it didn't stop there. A mere 2 years after that, they doubled again to $92 million. This wasn't just a successful product. This was a full-blown revolution, and Texas Instruments was standing right at the center of it all. You'd think that would be enough, right? Nope. As if inventing the silicon transistor wasn't enough, just 4 years later, another TI engineer, a guy named Jack Kilby, invents the integrated circuit. You and I know it as the microchip. He was the one who figured out how to cram a bunch of transistors onto a single tiny piece of material. And that invention, that is the foundation of every single computer, smartphone, and modern electronic device on the planet. No exaggeration.
So, okay, with that kind of history, a history of literally world-changing inventions, what does the company actually look like today? Who is the real Texas Instruments?
Well, today, their core business is exactly what it's been for decades. I mean, here it is in their own words. They design and make semiconductors that we sell to electronics designers and manufacturers all over the world. Simple as that. That is the heart and soul of the company. And honestly, this chart just says it all. Look at this. 35% of their money comes from industrial stuff, another 25% from personal electronics, 19% from the auto industry, and then way down at the bottom, you see it, lumped into calculators and other, just 3%. That's it. The product we all know them for is just this tiny slice of their business.
So I gotta ask you, now that you've seen that chart, now that you know their history, did you kind of underestimate this company? I mean, I know I did. It's such a classic case of a brand being famous for one thing, while its real world-changing impact is happening somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, when you put all the pieces together, their legacy, it isn't really about math class at all. It's a legacy of deep, fundamental innovation. So let's just recap the journey of this hidden giant. They start out in the 30s, revolutionizing oil exploration. Then the 50s hit, and they commercialize the silicon transistor and invent the microchip, two of the most important inventions of our time, period. And it wasn't until 1972, after all of that world-changing stuff, that they finally released their first calculator. It was almost like a side project, you know? Just something they could do because of all the other amazing tech they'd already invented.
So, at the end of the day, Texas Instruments isn't a calculator company that dabbles in semiconductors. It's the other way around. They are a foundational, world-changing semiconductor company that just so happens to make calculators. And that leaves me with one final thought. What other quiet giants like this are out there hiding in plain sight, powering the world we live in every single day?